Hello all, Game Methuselah. First of all, if you're a Patreon of mine, stay to the end of the video or fast forward to it. I'm starting a miniature giveaway on my site, so I'll get that information for you at the end of the video. Secondly, if we're starting to talk about all the old games, the old role-playing games and the systems that existed, originally I thought I was going to do this in chronological order, starting with original D&D and all the modifications that were made, like the Southern California Dungeons and Dragons in the 70s was really highly influenced by the Caltech people who gamed. They produced their own set of additional rules, addendum, and they got published by a company called Balboa Games in Long Beach, which is actually the Warhouse Game Shop, which is still there now. And it looks very, very similar to the way it looked in the 70s. This is going to be video 2 of the same. It's Don't Be That Guy. Now, being a DM, you get yourself in a different mindset, and often it's more difficult to step into a character role after being the long-suffering Dungeon Master. After my last video, I had an open house, and we had some of my friends come down and met some new people. We had some gaming, we had some good talks. In fact, I kind of wish I had recorded the conversation amongst all the Game Masters because it was really, really interesting, but it didn't occur to me at the time, and I feel like something kind of interesting and good was lost, but I guess that's the nature of the world. What did come out of it, though, is I have a new friend, Steve, who came down, and he DMs at the Barnes & Noble, which I found mystifying, that Barnes & Noble was having in-store Dungeons & Dragons to try to enhance their sales and, get people into the store. Now, he invited me down to come down and play. I said, you bet. But I did, and I had a great time. It's a group of people that some of them have played a little bit. A couple of them had not played at all. And Steve is a really good game master, and it's been really fun. I've enjoyed it. So now I basically show up at the Barnes & Noble in Huntington Beach about every other Friday, and we're playing Dungeons & Dragons. And it's a fun group of nice people. Now, after the first week, my friend Dave said, God, I'd love to do more D&D. Steve, I called. He said, hey, I'd love to have him. So my friend Dave went with us. Now, we're sort of both vintage, high-powered gamers. And I sort of admonished Dave to don't run anything too unusual or difficult or overpowered. Maybe a cleric. They kind of need a cleric. Maybe that. So, Dave said, no problem. I love clerics. I'll do that. So when I picked him up, we were driving down there. He said, well, I decided to run a warlock with a celestial patron. And I'm like, uh-oh. Well, I don't know. I don't really keep up on the characters as much. I kind of, like to be surprised by what the players produce. So I thought this will be great. He said, no, it's going to be sort of like a healing cleric. He's really good. And he was. He was very interesting. In this situation, it's a lot of new people. And Dave was great. He was really perfect. I, of course, was not necessarily perfect. And I think sometimes when you're so used to being the DM and adjudicating the rules, it's hard to sit there and not do so. Now, I was pretty good for most of the day, and mostly I'm real good about it. But there was one point when one of the players cast a spell. And I'm like, that's not the way the spell works. So I pulled out the rules, and we were reading the rules, and she was reading the rules, and we're going back and forth. And she goes, no, this is how the spell works. And I'm thinking, I don't think so. So I went online and found the Q&A. We showed her the Q&A, and finally she said the right smart thing. This is what Steve, our DM, lets us do. That's the correct rule. Once the Game Master makes a decision on how this works, that's how it works. And in retrospect, it doesn't hurt the game. It made the game more fun for her. And it kind of almost makes the spell, in some ways, a little more interesting. So I wasn't having a real problem with that. I said, go ahead and do it. But again, what I did is the don't be that guy. If you're an experienced game master, you don't want to be the person who shows up at a game, a living game, a new group game, anything, and be the know-it-all. And it's often hard when you game master and you're sure you know the rules. And I usually am very sure. My problem only is I'm never sure whether I'm quoting first edition or second edition or third or fourth or fifth. It's hard to tell. I don't remember. Too much rules piled into the brain. But the point I make is you want people to enjoy their game, and you want people to come along and play the game and get something out of it. Now, I was sitting next to the very novice wizard who had never played D&D before, and I think Steve was saying, well, you can help him out. And I tried to do so a little bit, but it had dawned on me that I don't want to come in and say, oh, do A, do B, do C, do E, because there's no level of discovery for him. It's just listen to what the old guy says, do what he says, and play the game. I might as well play his character, and that's not right. And that's not going to be good for him to grow, to learn, and to move forward. And really, it makes me sort of the problem at the table. That's often what happens in groups, where you have people who have disparaging skill levels, disparaging knowledge of the rules, and sometimes the attitude that I'm way smarter than everybody else. I don't want to be perceived that way. I think in the next case with him, if I'm going to advise, if he'll be willing to accept it, say, look, this is what I do. I have my little cantrip if I'm not doing anything else, and then I determine what these spells do at what moment in the battle. And certain spells you're going to use every round because they're beneficial always. Other spells are situational, and you need to know what that situation is so you don't waste that spell in an earlier position battle and not have it available for a climactic event if it is to come out. The point I make is always be helpful and cooperative. I think that if you work on it a lot, you're going to both improve your own game as a game master, because I tend to be very, very conciliatory as a game master, letting people do what they want, letting people design characters that may be unique and different from other people's, and do a lot. But I usually am fairly much a stickler to the rules, and I'm always sort of really a stickler to the fact that I am the game master. If I make a change in the game, it's perfectly legitimate because I, by the rules, am allowed to do so. And I think that should be always the case. The only thing is you often need, when you do that, to explain it to your players. I've had problems in the fantasy trip or any place where I've designed creatures or modified the rules, and you'll find that things like that leave a bad taste in people's mouths. I have a friend I've played with for many, many decades who's not happy with some of the changes I've made in the way creatures work in the fantasy trip, or the fact that I have brought Dungeons and Dragons creatures, made them to work within fantasy trip, and brought them into my game. Now, I can't necessarily do that much about it once I've created the problem, but I can sit down and try to mitigate it by getting him to understand what I'm trying to do with that and how it fits into the game. Now, always best to do that after the game. You don't want to really waste game time by having to explain the rules, though I'm sure all of you have played for any period of time, understands that comes up a lot in games. As a game master, I think the best thing to say is, you know what, let's address that after the game. And if you feel that you were treated unfairly, or it did not work out for you, or that I was maybe wrong, we can figure out a way to fix that for you in what happened in this game, and then have it fixed for down the road in additional games that we're going to be playing. Because it's really a give and take. Now, I know a lot of people, that's why they feel comfortable with modules, because they can always hold up and say, hey, it's in the module. I'm just doing what it says. That works. The problem there is I don't think it always makes people happy. You get stuck, and it's hard to adjudicate how that's going to work. Normally, I always find the best solution is run. Running normally is one of the best ways to get out of a problem in gaming. If your characters run, often the game master is going to work very hard to make sure that you don't get eaten, captured, murdered, whatever, unless it's going to enhance and lead down in the storyline. Game masters always, I think, even novices, are trying to make the experience as good as they can for you. And that is going to obviously work to your benefit. So try to work with the game masters as best you can. So sometimes you need to just maybe be quiet. In the situation that happened here, as I was explaining with my divine wisdom, how I knew how this spell worked and this young lady did not, my friend Dave kind of gave me the look. Really? You know better than this. And I do. And I stopped because she was right and I was wrong. If the Game Master allows you to do something within the game, it's perfectly great. So kind of remember that and not be the rules lawyer, because I always work at not being the rules lawyer, but found myself that night being it. So a word to the wise, hopefully, as my grandmother used to say, would be sufficient. I want to talk about is computer games. Now, I love computer games. I've been playing computer games since there were computers. Sometimes I find them to be time vampires. World of Warcraft, I was on the open beta playtest, and I loved it. Ate, slept, breathed it. I mean, all I did was play the game and work when I had to work. But once again, they take away from things I think sometimes you'd rather be doing. My friend and I, who play games every week, have not been playing a lot because he's gotten back into an MMO he loves. And every time I go up there and see him and we play a game, I sort of always feel like I'm getting the bum's rush because he wants to get back to the MMO. I understand that affliction. But the thing to remember is they're transitory. You're not going to be playing this game in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. But delve into the games that you're going to be playing for the rest of your life. And I think this is where role-playing is really great. I think that board games bring this out as well. I have a site with my friend Dawn on YouTube called Gone But Not Forgotten Games. But sadly, I think sometimes the gone and forgotten is what happens. When I started to talk about games, I wanted to do D&D 0, and people seem to fog over, when I would speak to them about that. So much of the improvement that's come has to be based on what started. Now, in most board games and in most role-playing games, you get a lot of heroics, a lot of good sportsmanship, a lot of camaraderie, a lot of things that you'll be able to take into your life and make part of it in great things that happen. Remember, the two things you really don't want to be is a boring know-it-all in a board game or role-playing game, or one of these people who wants to tell everybody else how to run their characters, also not good. And if you're playing on the computer games, which I understand everybody does, don't be a troll. Don't be the person who ruins the experience for everybody else. Try to be just the opposite. Because the thing that people don't get is if you ruin the experience for other people, they'll just quit playing. Games suck you in, and they make your life better if you keep control of them. You don't want to hop into a game and forget that you have friends, and forget you have obligations, and forget that you have a life. And that happens. And sometimes it happens more than you want it to. Remember, the best advantage in your games is to get other people involved in gaming with you. And then you have a shared experience that everyone can enjoy, and that makes gaming better. We have a chance to speak again. Fight me, devils, fight, for I hate peace. Game on. For my Patreons who stayed on afterwards, just wanted to let you know that after this video is posted, I'm going to take some pictures of some miniatures that I'm putting up on my Patreon site that I'm going to give away this month. So if you are interested, go onto my site and say, yes, I'm one of your Patreons and I want this miniature. I'm going to put up a little set of undeads from the 70s, archers, and I'm going to put up some figures from the 70s, unpainted, 2 groups. So there'll be 2 things to win. I'm just going to make a roll based upon whoever says they want it. If you want it, please, 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 put your name in and then we'll get you in the roll. If you don't want it, don't jump in on it. I mean, if you really need some money and you want to get it and put it on eBay, I understand. I can't stop you. But my point here is I want to get things out to people who really want it and want to be able to add to their miniature collections. So hopefully you'll understand, but I'm going to be doing this every month. I love to have my stuff, Steve's stuff, anybody's stuff in other people's hands who appreciate it and are using it to move gaming forward because I love the hobby so much. I really want it to get better and better and better over time.